There's a strange confidence that religion offers. It tells people they already know the answers to the biggest questions, before they've even asked them properly. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What happens when we die? Religion doesn't say, we don't know, let's investigate. It says, here's a book. Everything's in there, don't question it. And that's the beginning of the problem. The problem with religion isn't just that it's wrong, it's that it discourages the search for what's right. It hands people certainty without evidence and tells them that doubt is a flaw, but doubt is the foundation of progress. Every major discovery began with a question, not a conclusion. Every advance in medicine, technology, or ethics came from someone who said, I'm not sure this is true, let's test it. Religion doesn't test, it teaches, but not the kind of teaching that sparks curiosity. It teaches rules, rigid ones. It doesn't say, here's what we think, go explore. It says, here's what you must believe, or else you're wrong, or else you're evil, or else you're going to suffer forever. When a child is born into a religion, they're told from day one that their group is right and everyone else is wrong. That's not education, that's programming, and once that's deeply installed, it's hard to uninstall. It's not just about beliefs, it becomes identity. People don't say, I think these things, they say, I am this thing. So, to question the belief feels like questioning the self. That's how religion creates a kind of mental lockdown, a firewall against self-correction. One of the biggest problems with religion is that it makes the extraordinary seem ordinary. A talking snake, a man living inside a whale, a virgin birth, a God who creates a universe and then micromanages dietary laws. These are not normal ideas, but when repeated often enough and from a young enough age, they start to sound reasonable, and anything that contradicts them sounds suspicious. Religion takes ancient myths and freezes them in place, as if time and knowledge should never touch them. It doesn't evolve with new evidence, it resists it. The more we learn about the world, its age, its complexity, its physical laws, the more religion retreats into metaphors or doubles down on literalism. Both approaches dodge the same issue. The evidence simply doesn't line up. In science, when data contradicts a theory, the theory changes. In religion, when data contradicts doctrine, the data is dismissed. That's not a minor difference. That's the core of why one leads to progress and the other leads to stagnation. Religion claims to offer moral guidance, but it often confuses morality with obedience. It doesn't ask people to think through ethical questions. It gives them commandments. Don't ask why, just obey. The good is whatever the scripture says it is. That's how people end up thinking that killing for faith is righteous, or that eternal punishment is justice. It's not hard to find examples. People were burned alive for reading the Bible in their own language. Others were tortured for doubting the earth was the center of the universe. Women were stoned for being raped. Children were told they deserved hell for being curious. These aren't distortions of religion. These were supported by it. Even today, religion still fights against human rights, against gay marriage, women's autonomy, sex education, scientific understanding. And when those things become legal, religion doesn't apologize. It adapts its language just enough to stay relevant. The doctrines don't change, just the tone. It's easy to say, well, not all religious people are like that. That's true. But the issue isn't with individual believers. It's with the system that teaches people to value belief over evidence, to obey authority without question, and to separate humanity into saved and damned. That kind of thinking doesn't encourage compassion. It encourages tribalism. Religion tells people that this life is just a test, that the real reward comes later. That's a dangerous idea, because it devalues everything real: the earth, the body, the mind, relationships, the present moment. It tells people to focus on the next world, while the one we live in burns. Environmental damage, injustice, poverty. Why care if this is just a temporary waiting room? But it's not a waiting room. It's the only room we know exists. Religion makes people believe they're chosen, that a supreme being created billions of galaxies, but still has a personal plan for them. That's not humility. That's ego dressed as piety. And it's ego that allows people to justify war, persecution, and discrimination, because they think they're carrying out a divine will. Throughout history, the most brutal regimes have aligned themselves with religion. They've used it to silence dissent, control behavior, and justify violence. Religion gives power a sacred cover. It makes obedience feel holy. And that's why so many leaders throughout time have kept it close. Not because it's true, but because it's useful. Religion also creates deep guilt for natural human feelings. It turns normal impulses into sins. It tells people that thoughts can be crimes, that sexuality is shameful, that doubt is weakness. So instead of helping people understand themselves, it teaches them to fear themselves, and then offers a cure for the fear it created. It says, "You're broken, but we can fix you." It's a psychological trap. Break a person's sense of worth, then make yourself the only source of healing. That's how cults work. That's how control works. One of the most overlooked problems with religion is how it wastes potential. Brilliant minds, engineers, doctors, thinkers, spend their time defending myths instead of exploring truths. Talented people devote their energy to rituals, translations, apologetics, and doctrine policing. All of that human effort spent not on solving real problems, but on preserving ancient ones. Religion claims to bring people together, but it also builds walls. You're either in the group or out of it. And if you're out, you're less than. You need saving. Or you're a threat. That kind of division poisons relationships. It turns neighbors into strangers and strangers into enemies. And what's most tragic is that religion didn't start this way. Long ago, it may have been a way to make sense of a confusing world, to find comfort in suffering, to create order in chaos. But it hasn't kept up with what we now know. It hasn't updated its model, and instead of being a stepping stone, it's become a roadblock. Today we know more than any generation before us. We know the earth isn't flat. We know diseases aren't caused by demons. We know the universe doesn't revolve around us. But religion still operates on outdated maps. It still tells people to trust the old story, even when the new one makes more sense. That's not just inconvenient, it's dangerous. Because when people act on beliefs that contradict reality, the results can be harmful, to themselves, to others, and to the planet. The refusal to evolve is not a neutral position. It has consequences. When a worldview resists correction, it doesn't just stay still. It drags everything backward. It pulls education into confusion. It infects laws with superstition. It replaces thoughtful dialogue with slogans. And most importantly, it trains people to treat certainty as a virtue instead of a warning sign. Certainty without evidence is not strength. It's blindness. It makes people feel powerful while keeping them in the dark. The most dangerous ideas in history weren't dangerous because they were wrong. They were dangerous because people refused to question them. That's the difference between a healthy mind and a captured one. A healthy mind welcomes questions. A captured mind fears them. Religion captures by claiming moral superiority. It says, if you doubt this, you're not just wrong, you're wicked. So people defend the belief, not because it makes sense, but because it feels safe. But safety built on falsehood is not safety. It's a delay. It's postponing the crash. And when truth finally arrives, it shatters everything that was built on the lie. There's also a subtle way religion discourages real thinking. It gives answers that don't actually explain anything. Why did this tragedy happen? It's part of God's plan. That's not an explanation, that's a shutdown. A placeholder for knowledge. But people accept it because it relieves them of the burden to investigate. And that's how religion creates mental laziness. It trains people to stop at the first convenient answer instead of digging deeper. It rewards passivity. It discourages critical thought. Not just about the cosmos, but about life, morality, politics, society, even the self. When people stop asking hard questions, society stagnates. Progress becomes difficult. Curiosity becomes rare. And control becomes easier. Because people who don't ask questions are easy to lead. The worst part is that religion often sells all of this as humility. But real humility is knowing you don't have all the answers. Real humility is being willing to change your mind when better information comes along. Religion, in many cases, does the opposite. It doubles down, even when it's wrong. Take the idea of hell, eternal punishment for finite crimes. No modern justice system would allow such cruelty. But religion defends it, not because it makes sense, but because it's written. That's not justice. That's revenge written into theology. And then there's prayer. Billions of people believe that by speaking certain words to an invisible being, they can influence reality. But When prayer fails, when the cancer spreads, when the flood comes, when the child dies, they don't question the idea. They blame themselves. I didn't pray hard enough. I lacked faith. The system never admits fault. It just blames the user. Religion makes people take personal responsibility for cosmic silence, and then praises that self-blame as devotion. That's not healthy. That's emotional abuse on a societal scale. In many ways, religion creates a world upside down. Knowledge is arrogance, ignorance is virtue, pain is growth, doubt is betrayal, and faith, belief without evidence, is the highest achievement. But in every other part of life, we know that belief without evidence is a mistake. We don't let engineers build bridges on faith. We don't let doctors prescribe treatments based on hope. We don't navigate planes using prayer. In every serious area of life, we demand evidence, reason, testing, and correction. Except in religion, where we've somehow decided that being wrong is not just acceptable, it's sacred. The problem isn't just logical, it's practical. Religious ideas shape behavior. If you believe you're commanded to convert others, you might harass, shame, or even attack those who resist. If you believe you're favored by a deity, you might feel entitled to power. If you believe the end of the world is near, you might not care about the environment or the future. These are not theoretical concerns. They're real. They play out in policy, in war, in classrooms, in hospitals, in courtrooms. Beliefs drive actions. And when those beliefs are untested and absolute, the consequences are unpredictable and often dangerous. Even the claim that religion provides meaning is worth examining. Meaning doesn't come from obedience. It comes from engagement, from relationships, creativity, growth, contribution. Religion doesn't create meaning, it assigns it. And assigned meaning feels shallow, especially when it's disconnected from reality. You can't build a meaningful life on answers you're not allowed to question. That's not meaning, that's submission. And submission disguised as purpose is one of the oldest tricks of power. People often say religion gives them hope. But hope in what? That this world doesn't matter? That justice will only happen after death? That truth will only be revealed in another realm? That's not hope. That's deferral. That's postponing your dignity for a promise that can't be verified. Hope that isn't grounded in possibility is just wishful thinking. And when billions of people are taught to wait for miracles, they're less likely to work for change. Passive hope is a tool of control. It tells people to be still when they should be moving. There's also a deep contradiction in how religion approaches morality. It claims to teach right and wrong, but its own scriptures are filled with violence, misogyny, tribalism, and cruelty. Genocide, slavery, misogyny, child abuse. These aren't just mentioned in religious texts. They're endorsed, commanded. When modern believers say those parts are metaphor, or were culturally appropriate at the time, they reveal the real problem. The book isn't timeless. It reflects the ignorance of its era, and clinging to it as the source of ultimate truth creates moral confusion. We're better than that now. Our empathy has grown. Our understanding of human rights has improved. But religion often resists these developments, as if holding on to ancient errors makes them sacred. Progress doesn't come from repeating the past. It comes from recognizing its mistakes. And religion, by claiming perfection, puts itself beyond correction. That's the opposite of moral growth. The truth is, morality doesn't need religion. It needs awareness, empathy, and courage. It needs people who are willing to understand each other's pain, not because a God told them to, but because they care. Because they can see suffering and want to stop it. That's enough. And that's more honest than any sermon. Religion also distorts death. It tells people not to grieve honestly. It promises reunions in heaven instead of helping people process real loss. It encourages denial, not healing. It turns funerals into lectures, not support groups. But death is part of life, and facing it honestly, understanding its finality, makes us value our time, our connections, our choices. It makes us treasure the moment. Religion, by pretending there's more, often makes people miss what they already have. When you believe this life is only a trial, you stop treating it like a gift. You stop protecting it. You stop appreciating it. You start postponing joy, postponing justice, postponing healing. All because you think the real version of those things is coming later. But there's no later that we know of. There's only now. and now is being neglected by billions because religion told them it's just a waiting room. Religious people often say that without belief, life has no meaning. But meaning is not something that falls from the sky. It's something we create. It comes from doing, connecting, learning, building, caring. When you realize you're not here for a divine mission, you start seeing that you're here for something even more profound: the brief, unlikely, and incredible experience of being alive. If you only get one shot, you start paying attention. You start making it count. Religion says you need eternity to have purpose. But what if purpose becomes clearer when you know your time is limited? The value of something often comes from its rarity. A finite life isn't meaningless. It's urgent. It's precious. It's full. Another overlooked issue is how religion hijacks gratitude. Instead of thanking the farmers, the doctors, the engineers, the workers, the teachers, people thank an invisible being. Instead of recognizing human effort, they deflect it upwards. That steals credit from the people who actually did the work, and it discourages responsibility. If good things come from above, then you don't have to create them yourself. You just have to pray for them. But things don't change because we hope they will. They change because people act, people plan, people work. Progress isn't handed out, it's built. And when religion turns people into spectators of divine will, it weakens their drive to be participants in human progress. Religion also trains people to ignore contradictions. They'll say their God is loving, and also that he'll torture people forever. They'll say their scriptures are perfect, but reinterpret the parts that are clearly brutal or outdated. They'll say morality comes from their faith, but behave better than the books they claim are holy. These aren't minor contradictions. They're mental gymnastics that people perform every day, often without realizing. And once your brain gets used to that kind of thinking, of bending facts to fit beliefs, it starts applying that method everywhere, in politics, in science, in relationships. You stop looking for what's true, and you start looking for what confirms what you already think. That's how you create echo chambers. That's how you erode honesty. That's how entire societies become fragile. Some of the most irrational ideas in religion are also the most accepted. A God who creates humans knowing they'll fail, then punishes them for failing. A blood sacrifice required for forgiveness. A talking animal dispensing forbidden knowledge. A global flood wiping out almost all life because the Creator couldn't tolerate disobedience. These are not moral tales. They're absurdities, recast as deep wisdom. But people defend them, not because they make sense, but because they've attached their identity to them. And once belief becomes identity, argument feels like attack. That's why conversations about religion become so difficult. It's not just ideas you're questioning, it's someone's sense of self, and that's by design. Religion fuses belief with ego, so any change feels like betrayal. Even doubt is seen as weakness, but doubt is a strength. It's the first sign that the mind is alive. A system that punishes doubt is afraid of discovery. It's afraid of growth, and that fear is what keeps it standing. There's also the issue of religious exclusivity. Nearly every religion claims to be the only path to truth, which means that most of the world, by every religion's standards, is condemned. Billions of people, good, loving, thoughtful people, supposedly deserve eternal punishment because they were born in the wrong country, or asked the wrong questions, or didn't say the right prayer. That's not morality. That's tribalism amplified to cosmic scale. And yet, people are expected to defend this, to call it justice, to teach it to children. And if they don't, they're the heretics, the outsiders, the ones who need saving. That's how religion keeps expanding, not through ideas, but through fear and guilt. A healthy system invites criticism. Religion resists it. A healthy system corrects itself. Religion punishes correction. That's why blasphemy is still considered a crime in many parts of the world. Not because it causes harm, but because it challenges power. The fear of questions has led to imprisonment, exile, torture, execution. Not for acts, but for thoughts, for doubts, for expression. If an idea needs to be protected by violence, it's probably not a strong idea. But religion has always aligned itself with power. Kings were said to rule by divine right. Wars were fought in the name of gods. Empires spread with blessings from the pulpit. And even now, religion is used to justify political control. Over women's bodies, over education, over marriage, over speech. Religious institutions in many cases are among the wealthiest in the world. They collect donations from the poor and sit on billions. They build gold-covered shrines while children starve. They preach humility while hoarding influence. They claim moral authority while covering up crimes. This isn't a fringe issue. This is the norm. And even when the crimes are exposed, like the global sexual abuse scandals within religious organizations, the response is often not justice, but damage control. Protect the reputation, protect the institution. And again, the victims are told to forgive, to stay silent, to pray. What other system gets this kind of immunity? What other institution could commit global abuse and still be treated as a source of moral guidance? The answer lies in the nature of belief. Once people believe something is sacred, they stop holding it accountable. They treat it differently. They defend it, even when it's wrong. That's the real danger. Not just that religion can do harm, but that it makes people overlook harm, excuse it, justify it. Religion trains people to submit, to authority, to texts, to tradition. But submission is not a virtue, it's a habit. And habits, when reinforced from childhood, are hard to break. They shape how we see ourselves, how we see others, how we see the world. But breaking that habit is possible. And when people do, they often describe it as waking up. Not because they were stupid before, but because they had never been allowed to think freely. Once they do, the world opens up. Not with certainty, but with clarity. Not with final answers, but with better questions. Once someone allows themselves to ask honest questions without fear, they begin to rebuild their understanding. Not from tradition, but from reality. From what they see, test, feel, observe, and experience. That kind of understanding is never perfect, but it's honest, it's flexible, it can grow. That growth doesn't require rituals, creeds, temples, or intermediaries. It just requires curiosity and honesty. Two things that religion, when practiced dogmatically, constantly undermines. People often think rejecting religion means rejecting meaning, or wonder, or beauty. But the opposite is true. When you stop seeing the world as a temporary hallway to heaven or hell, you start seeing it as the main stage. You stop waiting. You start living. You notice the complexity of life, not because it was designed, but because it evolved. You find wonder not in sacred texts, but in DNA, galaxies, neural circuits, coral reefs, quantum particles, and music written by people who knew they were mortal. You stop needing divine command to act with compassion. You start seeing that kindness is enough on its own. You stop trying to earn a reward. You start helping because it helps. That's not emptiness, that's integrity. And when you stop believing someone is watching your every move, judging your every thought, you become free in a way that most believers never taste. Not free to do harm, but free to take responsibility. Free to grow, to change, to learn, to admit mistakes without fearing eternal punishment. You become accountable to others, not to invisible forces. And that makes you more human, not less. Religion tries to answer everything by collapsing it into a story. A God made everything. A fall happened. A punishment was deserved. A savior appeared. A final judgment awaits. It's a tight narrative, but it only works if you don't ask too many questions. If you stop asking why pain exists, why the innocent suffer, why the universe is mostly empty, why no one has seen or heard a God in any consistent way. It's a system built on mystery, but not the useful kind of mystery, not the kind that invites exploration, but the kind that closes doors and labels the unknown as divine. That's not reverence, that's retreat. The more we learn, the more we realize we don't need myths to feel awe. We don't need scripture to act with compassion. We don't need priests or prophets to access meaning. These are human capabilities, and they're not made stronger by superstition. They're made stronger by knowledge. And yet, religion clings on, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. It provides structure, identity, community, comfort. Those are real needs, and it's worth saying. The problem is not that humans seek connection or stories or guidance. The problem is that religion often gives bad answers to those needs. It gives connection based on exclusion. It gives stories that confuse. It gives guidance that's outdated or harmful. A more honest system would offer those same things: community, story, ethics, without pretending to know what it can't, without claiming to speak for the cosmos, without punishing doubt, without elevating belief above understanding. We don't need perfect answers. We need honest ones. We don't need final truth. We need open minds. And we don't need religion to find meaning. We just need to pay attention to each other, to the world, to this fragile and astonishing life we've been given. The problem with religion is not just that it's untrue, it's that it teaches people to settle, to stop searching, to trade wonder for obedience, responsibility for submission, and potential for promises. It sells certainty at the cost of curiosity. And it's curiosity, not faith, that has moved us forward. The human story is not over. We are still learning, still growing, still stumbling toward a better understanding of ourselves and the universe. Religion often says that all the important truths have already been revealed, but progress tells us otherwise. The real revelations, the ones that have cured disease, explored space, expanded rights, and deepened empathy, came not from revelation, but from effort, from trial and error, from minds willing to admit they were wrong. We should not fear the absence of gods. We should fear the absence of honesty. We should not cling to myths for comfort. We should build a world where truth is enough, where kindness doesn't need a reward, where awe is drawn from reality, and where each life, short, fragile, uncertain, matters because it's real. Thanks for watching. If this made you think, that's all it was meant to do. Stay curious, stay honest, and take care of each other.